play it forward, Christine, who never, Kuneva, you're gonna do it
Perfect.
better than I can. Walker, writer director, the Aaliyah King. Um, Kristen, yes, would you like to introduce yourself in any way?
Christine
Gr-
Cuneva Walker. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, how would you like to introduce yourself and your film and the subject matter and your experience with it before we jump into the three questions of Play It Forward?
Why don't we just jump into it?
Let's jump into it.
Yeah,
All
let's
right.
do it.
So, it's a really beautiful family film, and there are a lot of really special moments that are captured that are definitely, I think, anyone can relate to if they've been brought up in a quote unquote traditional family, just meaning, a father, a mother figure. Um, and the first question to play it forward is where, and I know this is a personal piece, I know this is based on your own history,
Mhm.
um, but the impetus for you to make this movie in terms of that kernel, that seed that lives and lived in you since you've already made the movie, I, use past tense. Um, why did you feel that you needed to make this movie? What was the inspiration?
Yeah, well, I think at first, or one of the reasons why I just wanted to creatively explore or use the medium that I'm used to using to explore the confusing, if not fraught, experience of growing up in a multicultural household of Hawaiian and German immigrants who desperately wanted to assimilate into a Mormon culture and into the culture of the Mormon Church. The Mormon Church sponsored their move to America, and in the case of my father, we call it the mainland. Um, but all of that came at a price, and more so, I would say, for my father, who came from a long line of Native Hawaiian fishermen, than I would say from my mother, whose upbringing was more Western Eurocentric.
Christine, it's a fascinating, very unique background. You were telling me how it's really you wanted to explore and in a cathartic way, really, the dynamics of your, early childhood. And I think that's such, like I think I watched behind the scenes and the lead actor was talking about film being such a cathartic experience, and art making in general, and both for the art maker and it's the intention is for the art consumer.
Yeah. No,
So
it's
yeah,
really what I
yeah.
was surprised by. Oh my gosh, look how cute. Uh, what a beautiful child. Um,
Thanks. We're hiding the
I
screen
think
from
I
her.
was surprised by I was surprised by how much the story resonated with the people in the cast and our crew. It didn't matter what background they had, but the story resonated with them in a way that was really special. I wanted to make a film, about unconscious bias in the home. Where does and where does that start? And we are more familiar with talking about unconscious bias in society and with people who don't know us. But what happens when that happens within the home of a multicultural, multi-generational family? And how do children take that in? And what do they, how do they respond to that? So I also wanted to tell a story about a family, maybe a family in crisis, or almost in crisis, a family that's struggling. The parents are trying to achieve the American dream. They're preoccupied with trying to fit in, trying to be successful, trying to navigate the cultures, which are unfamiliar to them. And the children kind of get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to tell that story, and that story resonates with almost everybody. Um, and then I wanted to tell a story that I thought was compelling and entertaining. I want to deal with these issues, but a lot of us are tired of talking about racism, talking about unconscious bias, reading about it. The best way to, in my mind, the best way to address these issues is really through storytelling. And I found myself having so many conversations with family members and friends who are very on opposite sides of the political spectrum than I am, who were open to a conversation about what it feels like when certain things happen in your home, or when your parents are in disagreement or don't understand where each other came from. So that for all of those reasons, I felt compelled to tell this story, and the short film format made it, I don't know, feel more like I could experiment, and I didn't feel as confined to like a 3-act structure, even though I think my short film ultimately conforms to that. But I felt like I could be more free to tell my story with the short film format. Um, so that's
I get
why
it.
I wanted to do that.
I
And
get
it's great talking to so many crew members about their family stories in the process.
Yeah, and the unconscious bias and families in crisis, I think everybody can relate to, because you don't need two parents to come from different cultural perspectives. They're coming from two different life points of views, and coming together and having the shared responsibility of a household raising three children. It's can be an overwhelming thing to do, especially at a time where people may or may not have been as reflective and as society can be today now, in generations that um, are further along in the future scope and dealing with a life trauma. Just how people deal with trauma, we have more things accessible to us today.
Yeah.
So the narrative and writing the narrative, shooting the narrative, and then viewing the narrative as you're in progress now. You've got a fine cut, you're almost at the final
Yeah.
cut. What do you see are the thematic things that are jumping out to you, and what are you feeling really, emotionally like, whoa, yeah, I get, that's a message to you personally in the film. So what are some of those messages that you're getting from the movie?
Sure. Well, that's a really good question, because I know what I was thinking about when I wrote the film and what I wanted to convey. But now I have to deal with what's there, what exists. And there's some shots we didn't get. If I had had a lot more time to shoot, um, I kept saying, "Oh my gosh, I missed this or I missed that." But I feel really good now, after at least we've gotten to a picture cut, that the themes that I wanted to convey are there. It someone watched the rough cut and they said, "I want to see the feature," or "I want to see more about this family." So I know it also leaves itself open for further development of those themes. But the film is told, but from a 10-year-old's perspective, and she has grown up away from her cultural roots, and her parents aren't really sharing a lot about their culture, especially the Hawaiian culture, with her. And so the only references she has are through popular culture. And in her mind at the beginning of the film, she sees, for her, like, if I can go to the opening of the Enchanted Tiki Room or the Tiki Land at Disneyland, that's where I'm gonna learn about my culture, and I felt that way. I felt like, oh, when I saw, Elvis Presley movies, or when I watch films that are set in Hawaii, I I or I watch films, I would be really excited because I thought this is where I'm learning about my culture. But in fact, of course, no. And what do those kids do when their only references are through popular culture? And especially those that are stereotypical, or in the case of women, fetishized. And so I wanted to tell a story that about what it's like to yearn for a cultural connection. But ultimately, I think the film is about, and it's embodied through one of the characters in the film, who is Hawaiian. He's come to the mainland. He works there at a gas station and also performs. And for him, he still, no matter what job he does, no matter where he still is maintaining connection to his culture. And he still has a very strong sense of himself, and he reminds himself that he can never forget where he came from. And for those of us who grew up in the cultural diaspora, whatever diaspora it is, we need to work harder to stay connected to those roots. But I think that was but nonetheless, I think
Mhm.
the meaning is that, or the message is that we there's a it's through our cultural roots and through connecting to those roots that we have a place that will never, we'll always be connected. We'll always find answers. And
Mhm.
I also want to make this film to respond to this current climate we live in. People feel alienated, and some turn to religion, some turn to politics, and those aren't sufficient in answering those questions. And I feel like more often than not, turning to those answers serve to divide us. But when we turn to our cultural roots, um, the world opens up, ironically enough. So that is a strong message for me in my life, and I have worked hard to learn more about where I came from, and worked hard to stay connected to my family, even though I've never lived full time in Hawaii.
Mm, mm. Thank you for that, Christine. What I'm hearing and what I'm getting out of that is, growing up and needing the basic need of belonging. That's a basic child need, not even a want. Um, and so very much, belonging and identity, those two things relate. And when you have um, a family, in the nuclear family, it's divided, whether it's divided by culture or divided by violence or whatever it is, that struggle, that it never gets fulfilled. Um, and there's a wound there. And so how do you go back and to heal that wound? And for you, and many, I think, going back and, discovering and really understanding the richness of a culture that has been marginalized. So it's not only the culture um, that's there for exploration, but it's the bias that the popular culture has put upon the culture that you're coming from. So there's this less than mentality, and I can certainly relate to it. I think a lot of people can in different ways. And so that exploration and taking pride in who you are and your culture, cultivates that identification with a rich history And, it's a beautiful experience to go through as a human, and an evolutionary process of, one's own consciousness.
Absolutely. Thank you for putting it so beautifully. I think also as part of that journey for me, and I will think more about these issues in my other work, my subsequent work, and that is that in accepting culture, especially marginalized cultures, and your place in it, you also have to confront the challenges of that come along with being, in my case, from an indigenous culture, and the problems that many of my family members face who live in Hawaii, are and the challenges of, having land taken away, and dealing with poverty and all the ills that come with oppression, or come with uh, the genocide of a culture. Um, and that was, I think, from my mother, who's German, and we've talked about this a lot. I think that's what she wanted to spare us from that, from, and she thought, if I keep them in the States, if I don't allow them to associate even with Pacific Islanders who lived on the mainland in Utah where I grew up, maybe I will spare them from seeing the challenges that those communities face, and experiencing those challenges. And I understand that, but I still think we lost out, because there's a lot that we, my sisters and I, and other people who are spared that, there's a lot of time we lost in being able to make change and positively influence some of these uh problems, and have a positive impact. And so that's why I'm focused on telling these stories now, because I think I'm using the tools of my trade, what I've been practicing for years and years as a film producer. And I think just by telling my story, it will maybe make a difference. And telling real, true stories about Hawaiians and about our family members. So I don't know. I'm trying, I'm looking at some of the problems, and some of them are tough and they're sad. I have family members who are homeless, family members who are in prison. And I'm not saying it's just because they're Hawaiian, obviously, but they've had to deal with a racism, oppression. They've had to deal with a lot more challenges than I have growing up where I did.
Yeah. No, I think it's, absolutely how we change the world and contribute is by, doing the work on ourselves and being transparent with that work.
Yeah.
And, it's certainly the intentionality that you have now, focused on bringing that message to the public and to audiences, and to have people reflect on that. Our country has a rich history of violence and oppression, and it's, part of our work to heal that history. And it's incredibly sad, and it's certainly um can be a challenge not to fall victim and to hopelessness and helplessness, and at the same time, um to be able to make a positive change, to be able to sympathize with the marginalized, and yet to go on with positive life, and doing what we can for others who So there are really only three questions, but I do kind of riff with, subheading questions. And, I'm wondering, Christine, what you think of this. I mean, in my life and having, certainly experiences that are similar to yours and some cultural background kind of stuff going on. I was born in Kiev and I moved to Kansas City and at the age
Oh,
of 5, and I grew up there. And
right.
um, so, and having a Jewish European, Eastern European background, and um, we were marginalized in Kiev and we were marginalized in America as well. So, but it nothing compared to others marginalization. But it was my experience. That you're hurts and whatever. But my point that I'm trying to make is by giving you a little background on myself. You know, the identity. I find my identity most deeply in my spirit. That's where I really find a sense of home. And so there's all these layers. There's all these like layers that we need to embody as humans. There's maybe our gender or genderless thing, whatever. There's our nose. There is our culture. So all these kind of, and each one goes from a superficial level to a deeper level. And then there is a level of the humanity. And if we believe in, something beyond that, there is a spirit that I believe unites us all into a shared experience. So how does that sit with you? And how does that resonate with you in terms of your journey to find a home within your identity from this embracing your culture to what I just said? How do those two things correlate? And do they?
I mean, definitely. And I think that for those of us who have grown up under these fraught circumstances, or at best confusing and contradictory, there is a place that we where we go, and it's that protective place. And I think I've always had that in me. I call it a survivor instinct. But that said, my journey is trying to come out of that place, trying to come outside of myself. It took me a long time to tell even this short story. There's an incident in there that happened, all of these incidents happened that were true. And it comes from one of my earliest memories as a child. And I remember it happening, my mother blowing up, and my father was very humiliated. And it was the first time, first of all, that I realized my parents' marriage was in trouble. And the first time where I saw my parents as two vulnerable human beings. And I also saw myself as a vulnerable person. When you see when you realize your parents are two completely different people who aren't necessarily there just to protect you, that makes you feel very vulnerable. And so what happened to me growing up is I built this protective shield around myself, and didn't just look straight ahead, didn't really acknowledge my roots really, and didn't acknowledge things like unconscious bias or sexism or racism. It's like I'm alone in the world, and I just have to go forward, and I can't worry about what's happening to other people. And I got so far in my career where I realized, I remember meeting this one woman, sorry to go on so long, but I met this one very, very, very well-known woman. And she was the first, well, I'll say her name, Sandra Day O'Connor. I met her, and, she was the first in so many things in her life. And I said to her, boy, did you help other women in your career? And she sort of looked at me and she said, well, I hired female clerks. But she pretty much said, look, the fact that I am here and became a Supreme Court justice is my contribution, essentially. This is what she said to me. And I started thinking about it and I thought, okay, well, you cracked the door open, but that door slammed shut for a lot of other people, slammed shut behind you. And it made me made me think about myself and my role and my really acknowledging, not only who I am, but acknowledging that I have kept myself, that I have not acknowledged the problems that other women, that people of color have, um, and that maybe I can do something about it. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, but I didn't. I never attended a women's conference before, in my life, because I just thought I can't worry about that. I can't worry about other people's oppression. I just gotta close my eyes and move forward. So it took me time to sort of get away from the internal me and open my eyes. And and when you start looking out there into the world and really seeing as an artist, it's painful. It's painful. So part of my protective shield was just being a producer, helping people tell other people's stories, facilitating other people's storytelling. I didn't want to expose myself like I'm doing in this tiny little short film. This has been the most emotional experience of my life, making this film, because it's like, completely exposing that person. And so I don't know, I don't know if that really relates to what you're talking
It
about.
completely does. It
Okay.
completely does. It completely does. Because what I hear you saying is, I am working on my spirit, and these are the things that I'm playing with. These are the external realities that are particular to me and my life experience. But that is that. Of course, you are cultivating the spirit through you to expand, and that is an amazing, painful, excruciating journey, and yet it's so liberating, and it's wonderful that you've chosen that, and so brave and courageous, and you know um a model.
For saying that, because I do feel like it took a lot of courage to tell this story, and also to tell the story, of my parents and my siblings. I got their permission to tell this story. And I appreciate their courage in allowing me to tell the story as well.
I think that's a great point, to honor them as well. And, just like you were gesticulating, you ripped your heart open to do so. And, that is absolutely one of, if not the bravest thing we can do as, human beings.
Right.
Last question, play it forward. How have you been changed as a person since making this movie?
Oh man. Wow, in so many ways. I think that I'm much more open to other people's stories. I think I learned a lot about myself as a creative filmmaker. I was worried going into this about working with actors, and had always been a little bit intimidated by actors because I felt like I could do every role on a film set except for that. And so I I was proud that I could, here's the thing. If you communicate authentically, and if you are willing to expose yourself and your heart and your mind as much as these actors are willing to do, they will be there for you 100%. And that's what I found in making this film. And that I never envisioned that would happen for me. And I'm really grateful for that.
I think that's a great thing to say, Christine, because, absolutely critical with actors, directors, really anybody on set, that you're working with to build that level of trust and transparency and expose yourself. And with people, with life, because people, reciprocate that. Christine Kanuva Walker, writer, director. The film is The Ali E. King.
Ali King. Yep.
Thank you. A beautiful, beautiful family picture. Thank you for sharing your life experience with us. It was a pleasure to have you on the show.
Pleasure being here. I wish you all the success, and all the other filmmakers are participating in this program. It's awesome.
Thank you. Likewise. All right. Till next time, everybody on Play It Forward, peace out, and we will see you later.